I loved it. It was the beat of the teenagers. You know, it was the newest thing, and I loved it, and that's what I started playing. Before that, I was playing Hank Williams songs, and then the beat hit, the rock and roll hit, and I got in on the ground floor. Ed Sullivan Show. Friend of mine was up in Washington, D.C., the way the story goes. He was walking down the street. He saw Gene Vincent and walked up to him and said, "Aren't you Gene Vincent?" He said, "Yeah, I'm in town looking for a rhythm guitar player." And Paul Peake said, "Well, I play rhythm guitar." He said, "Well, you want a job playing rhythm guitar?" And Paul joined, and that started. Well, about a couple of days later, he said, "Now we need a lead guitar player." And so Paul said, "Well, I know one down in Greenville, South Carolina. He's playing in a band down there." And they came down from Portsmouth, Virginia to Greenville, South Carolina to see me. I was playing like a Friday night at a high school or something. They came down, listened to me, and hired me on the spot. So I went back to Portsmouth, Virginia, and we rehearsed a little bit and went out on the road. At that time, I was playing a 3-neck guitar. There wasn't but one more in the whole world. I had the second 3-neck guitar in the world. And Bubba kids about it, that's what got me hired with Gene Vincent, not my playing. Gene wanted that 3-neck guitar in his band. And I finally sold it to Gene. He bought me a brand new Gretsch to play, and I sold him the 3-neck guitar, so he became the sole owner of a 3-neck guitar. So according to Bubba, that's how I got to be one of the Blue Caps. He was very generous. He was not a star, prima donna type thing. No, he was not a. He was very generous, very down to earth. But Gene had. I feel Gene was always in pain. He had had a motorcycle accident and broke his leg real bad. It never did heal properly. And I feel that he was in pain quite a lot. So for somebody to be in 24-hour-a-day pain, and I assume he handled himself pretty well. Oh yeah, I did. The first Blue Caps, I understand, they didn't. They wanted to be home. They had wives and kids and jobs, and they didn't like the road. I loved it because it got me out of Lawrence, South Carolina. And we were all over the world. I mean, a little old boy from Lawrence, South Carolina. One day he's in New York, next day Chicago, next day Dallas, next Minot, North Dakota, and it was very exciting and all for me. Yes, I wouldn't have traded it for nothing, you know. But Roy Orbison was on the tour. Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, all the biggies of that time. That would have been in '57. About March or April of '57. And there was a big headliner tour. At that time, they called them package shows. There would be 7 or 8, maybe 10 acts on the same show. Whoever was the biggest hit at the time got to headline the show. You know, so Gene pretty much had the biggest hit. So we always pretty much closed the show. Gene and the Blue Caps. Jerry Lee's a tough act to follow. So they had him opening the show, and all these mediocre acts were following him, and that didn't quite go. After about a week of that, they had to rearrange the pattern and get say Ferlin or Sonny James to open the show, you know, and Jerry Lee had to come on pretty much to the last because he was so dynamic, you know. And then we'd follow Jerry Lee because we were a little bit more dynamic than him. But Jerry Lee can, yeah, he ain't going about to be a second banana nowhere. He's going to put forth a little extra. So, like for instance, in Australia, we played down there for 2 weeks with Little Richard. And needless to say, he had to close the show. You can't follow Little Richard. It was called Lotta Lovin'. And it got to about number 10, I think. It was never as big as Be-bop-a-lula. It got about number 10. And that's, to this day, I'm proud of that. And I sign my autographs and things. If it's a woman, I sign Lotta Lovin', Johnny Meeks. Now, I don't necessarily do that for the guys, you know, but so I'm proud of that. Lotta Lovin' was the first record I played on, and it was a big hit. And I was real happy with that. Hollywood, Capitol Towers in Hollywood. Now, I think Be-bop-a-lula was cut in, I'm pretty sure it was. It was cut in Nashville. But after that, all of Gene's stuff was recorded out in Hollywood at the Capitol Towers. Gene had a big hit off of a song called Say Mama, and I wrote half of it. Me and a guy named Country Earl got together and put the song together. I played it for Gene, and we recorded it, and it's still selling to this day. That was in 1958, and I still get 10 or 15 cents out of it every 6 months, you know. So they tell me it's running a second to Be-bop-a-lula. It's one of his biggest hits. About 4 albums, and maybe about 15 singles. I'm playing on most all of his after Be-bop-a-lula. They cut Be-bop-a-lula and I think 2 albums, or 1 or 2 albums, there within about a 3-month period. So the first couple of albums, and Be-bop-a-lula was the first Blue Caps. That was Cliff Gallup playing lead guitar. Then after that, I played on most everything that Gene cut on Capitol. The band was breaking up. Everybody wanted to go home. It just wasn't the same. Dickie, the drummer, had come back and left, and come back and left, and Bubba and Paul, they did the same. They came back for the movie and then left again. It wasn't that same group, the bond. And they'd send in somebody else, and he'd stay for a while, and he'd leave, and so it just got tiring that everybody wanted to quit and go home and blah blah. And we were in Hollywood, and there was no way I was going to leave Hollywood to go back to Lawrence, South Carolina. So I stayed in Hollywood, right, and was offered a job before the day we were going to break up. We were recording at Capitol, and everybody was going to finish that and go home. So we finished all the recording, and I stayed in Hollywood. I ain't about to go back home, you know. So I just coasted along from there on out. I had a job, I played that, and I played another job, and played another one, played another one, played another one, joined the Champs, and left the Champs, and went somewhere, and blah, blah. It's been going on ever since. 50 years of playing, and I hadn't had to ask for a job yet. Gene was booked in England. Eddie was booked in England. And Gene wanted me to go with them on that tour that killed Eddie. I could have been in that same taxi with him, but I refused it. I didn't go, no. So Gene would get Eddie to back him up on stage, you know. Now, Eddie didn't do all the antics and everything we did, but he did play good guitar. So he would back Gene on Be-bop-a-lula and stuff like that. Yeah, I was with the Champs at that time, the guys that had out Tequila. I was playing with the Champs. We were on a bus heading for Cleveland, I don't know. And they woke me up to tell me, Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran's just been in a car wreck in England. They heard it over the radio, the news radio. And they woke me up to tell me that, wake up, Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran had just been killed in a car wreck in England. I said, oh my goodness, that's the same tour I could have been on. Every time he was in Los Angeles, he tried to get me to go back to England with him or go on tour with him or something. And it had nothing to do with him. I just didn't want to do it. I was doing other things, you know. And it wouldn't have been the same, no way, without the rest of the Blue Caps. That bond, you know, that, like I said, we had a bond that can never be broken. Disbelief, you know, what? Gene died, you know? And then I got to getting details and all. He had come back from England. The ironic part of that was I was about 2 or 3 miles, he was about 2 or 3 miles from me when he had his attack. I was playing a nightclub and he was living about 3-4 miles away. And I'm playing this nightclub, and he's about 4 miles away, dying of bleeding ulcers. And he didn't know I was there, and I didn't know he was there. We were close, so to speak, to the very end. In that sense, where it happened out in California, and it was the next day or something before it came out in the paper. Before I knew about it. I didn't know about it. And it came out in the paper, and I'm saying, what? Yeah, I was a pallbearer at his funeral. And it was sad, very sad. Gene, I've seen a lot of these documentaries and all these things about rock and roll, and they very seldom, if ever, never mention Gene. Gene was a big star there in that era, and they hardly ever mention him. He hardly gets any recognition. Like I said, him and the Blue Caps are big over in England, but in the United States here, it's hard to find anything about Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps. They'll mention Jerry Lee and Elvis and Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson and Little Richard, and no Gene. And we were all right there in the same bag. And I've played with, like I said, about 100 bands, and none of them were that close with me. I still have memories of the Blue Caps that'll never go away. And I don't necessarily have that with other bands, you know. The Blue Caps were one of a kind.